Extra with Conan Nolan.
Good morning and welcome to News Conference Extra, a special segment of Today in L.A. Weekend. With us, the Honorable Adam Schiff, member of the United States House of Representatives from California, the Glendale, Burbank, Pasadena area. He's the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thank you very much for taking the time.
Great to be with you.
You've made news this past week by going out of your way, and this has been a passion of yours for some time, to get Congress into authorizing the president's military action against ISIL or ISIS overseas. Explain that.
We've been at war now for 6 months, and we haven't had a debate in Congress. We haven't had a vote. We haven't authorized the use of force the president is using now. Congress has basically been derelict in probably its most important responsibility, and that is the power to declare war. Last year I introduced a resolution because some of the Republican leadership was saying we won't go until the president goes. The president was saying we're waiting to get language from Congress. And meanwhile, the war was going on. Our service members were doing their duty, but in the Congress of the United States, we weren't doing ours.
Well, let's ask about that. The war is already going on. We are already militarily involved.
Well, the president is relying on two old authorizations to use force, one that we passed in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 and another that we passed in 2002 to authorize force essentially against the regime of the Iraqi dictator. Neither of those really apply to what's going on in Iraq and Syria now. Neither of them make any mention of ISIL. It didn't exist at the time. Nonetheless, the president has relied on them. And the risk here is we're at war in a very dangerous and difficult struggle in which the Congress has not really bought in. It has not had a vote. It's not had a debate. It's not set in the parameters. Are we allowed to use ground troops? Are we going to occupy more countries? And I think the Congress really needs to have a role here. And if we don't, and if this continues on, the next president is going to take a lesson from this, that Congress's role in the war-making arena is essentially an historical anachronism. So, yes, it's very late. It's not too late, and I think it's essential that we act now.
Shouldn't you first sunset the previous authorization?
Well, that's something I've tried to do now for 2 years, is sunset the old authorizations. And I think that...
Which specifically for the public watching, that gave President Bush the authority to respond to 9/11.
Exactly. It authorized the president to use force against those who were responsible for the 9/11 attacks. Now, ISIL wasn't in existence at the time, and in fact, ISIL has often fought the al-Qaeda franchise in Syria called al-Nusra. So it clearly, I think, doesn't apply to the current situation. But we never sunset that. We're going to sunset, I think, whatever new authorization that the White House proposes. That will be sunset. But if we don't also put the clock to those old resolutions, then even when a new resolution is passed, a new authorization, and that expires, a future president can say, I can still rely on that original 2001 power to go to war.
It's hard to understand how this would break down party lines, will it?
Well, it won't break down completely along party lines, but there are differences between the parties. Some in the conservative wing, McCain and Graham and others, want basically to give this president, ironically, because they consider him already an imperial president, essentially a blank check. No limits on ground troops, no limits on time, no limits on geography.
You then have libertarian Republicans like Rand Paul.
Exactly. You do have some of the Republicans who will be uncomfortable with another open-ended resolution. At the same time, most Democrats, but not all, are going to want something much more narrowly tailored that doesn't get us into a massive occupation of another country or countries. And there'll be some libertarian Republicans along with many Democrats, and there'll be some Democrats who vote for an unbridled authorization because they have trust in this president, even though it will extend to the next president as well.
So you're expecting to get language from the White House over the next week?
We will get, I think, either text or more likely we'll get concepts. This is what we'll support. This is what we think it should look like. They have been consulting with many of us now in Congress. There's a whole new level of engagement, and I think they will come up with something, fairly specific in terms of whether they are willing to accept the geographic limit, whether they're willing to accept the limit on ground troops and what that would look like, what kind of a sunset they have in mind, these kind of issues.
On another issue, in the budget, the federal budget, we understand there's $5 million. That's loose change to the federal government, but it will be allocated, from what we understand, to help with the earthquake warning system that Caltech, USGS are trying to develop. Is that money going to stay there?
It is going to stay there because Senator Feinstein and I are going to fight to make sure it does. The two of us teamed up last year, even though it was not a part of the president's budget, to get $5 million to build out that system that'll give Californians.
It'll take more than $5 million, but that'll help.
Absolutely, and that early money is essential because it attracts not only more federal money, as we have seen now that the president has put money in his budget, but I hope it will attract state money, it'll attract private sector money. And, frankly, California and the west coast of the United States have fallen behind nations like Mexico and Japan that already have an early system up and running that gives people up to a minute of advance notice when an earthquake's going to hit.
Finally, you have talked about possibly running for the United States Senate. Barbara Boxer's retiring from the Senate. Have you decided whether or not you're going to enter that campaign?
I haven't made a firm decision. I am giving it serious consideration. And I came here 40 years ago with my family. It was a time when we had the best roads and highways in the country, the best schools in the country, and if we didn't invent the American dream in California, we perfected it. There was a lot of upward mobility. And I'm very worried that we're losing that. And I'd love to see someone, if not me, champion a return to that and advocate as strongly on behalf of the whole state as I've done for my district.
When do we expect a decision?
I'm not in a position, as some others may be, of preempting the field. I wish I were. So for me, there's not that much premium to get in early to shape the field. So I would rather have a chance to really sound out my friends and supporters, my constituents, and figure out if this is the right time.
Adam Schiff, Democrat from Pasadena, thank you very much for joining us. Ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Good luck.
Thanks, Conan.
Appreciate it. Up next, Meet the Press. Then after that, on NBC4's news conference at 9 o'clock, we talk with State Senator Ben Allen of Santa Monica about why his city has such a poor inoculation rate and the legislation he's introduced to change California law in that regard. Also, the head of Covered California, Peter Lee, on the challenges facing the Affordable Care Act. And we remember Rick Orlov of the LA Daily News. That's on news conference at 9 o'clock following Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. We will see you then.